This third section of frequently asked questions cluster around the experience of those who are stuck. Remember, the stuck souls who come into my dreams all died violent, abrupt, traumatic deaths. I make that point repeatedly and will do so again here. Please don't assume that anybody that you love who has died in such a manner is stuck. I think it's a rare occurrence. Most people who die, even if they die abrupt violent deaths, cross over just fine. Even if they appear to die all alone, that's never really the case. Their guardian angel is always with them, and others come to surround them and to help them out. Most people, regardless of how traumatized they are at the moment of their passing, seem to be able to assent and take part and move through the process of dying and complete that crossing over. But some don't. The little population that I've been given to work with did not finish crossing over, and so they need some help. Why did they get stuck? Well, they have different reasons. If you've read my book or will read it, you'll see that some of them were simply overwhelmed. Others were angry and outraged at the incompetence of someone who brought about their sudden accidental death. Some were murdered and very angry that they were the target of someone else's violence. Sometimes they were just completely unprepared to die. Some found their identity very strongly in what they were doing here, their life's work, like raising small children. When death changes that in an instant, some find that they just don't know what to do next. They opt out of doing anything, at least for a while. Sometimes they're just ashamed or overwhelmed. There are many different reasons, but they all make a certain kind of sense from the point of view of the person who did get stuck. Even though they got stuck, it's not a permanent circumstance. I've been grateful to be involved in helping people get unstuck. How long are they stuck? Well, it depends. At first, I thought that none of these stuck souls experienced the passage of time because early on when I would ask about it, I would ask, do you remember what year you died in? You would think that that would be a fairly simple thing to remember. Oftentimes that was not the case. The year of your birth is a simple thing to recall, but for some people who have died, I've found that they stumbled around before they could exactly come to remember it. Most of those I've been called upon to help are persons who lived in the United States. If they were struggling to recall the year of their deaths, I hit upon asking them, oh, who was the president when you died? What's the last president you can remember? And then if they named one of them, because I know my presidents and what years they were in office, I have my answer. So that would give me a range of when they might have died. Usually it's not that enormously important anyway. Well, I did begin to think that all of these people paid no attention to time. Then, as events unfolded, I learned that, oh, some do pay attention to time, but they don't exactly live in it the way that they did before. They can pay more or less attention to it as they please. Some did pay close attention to time. How long are they stuck? Some of these are not in the book, but I've dealt with people who died in the Civil War. That's more than 150 years ago. But most have been in the last few decades. I'm 63, so most of the people that I've dealt with died during my lifetime, although a minority were prior to that. Even with those who died a long time ago, I haven't run across the notion that they were serving a penal sentence. When I was a child, some of the teaching that I got in Catholic school about purgatory seem to suggest that the length of time that a person stayed in purgatory was related to the number of sins they had committed. Time in purgatory was analogous to a prison sentence. If that's so, I haven't experienced it in the work that I do. Do any who didn't die suddenly get stuck? Well, I'm thinking of the woman Shelley. That's one of the ones in my book, the carpooler who was over the limit of alcohol in her blood when she backed over a child. She got stuck not at the moment of her death, but at the moment of this traumatic event that changed her life course. So yes, that would be the way I answer that. Have any first come to me in a dream and not subsequently come when invited? That is, do I have a dream of somebody, try to help them, and then find that they don't show up when we offer to help them? I'd say in 20 years of this work, that might have happened a couple of times. There have been some occasions where I've let too much time lapse between when the visitor first came and when I got around to having a prayer partner available to help them. There have been times when I did a poorer than average job of writing down what happened, and maybe I'm even a little fuzzy on the details of their story. There might have been a time or two where I'm pretty sure that the dream that I had was a night visitor, but maybe not. There have been only a couple of times that I can think of where we've made ourselves available to try to help someone and found that no one came. I didn't really know what to make of that, but it's a pretty rare occurrence. When a soul or a person eventually crosses over, is there always someone to accompany or greet them? That, I'm happy to say, is an absolute yes. I've never dealt with anybody who was ready to cross who found that nobody came for them. In fact, sometimes their whole family line stretching back into what feels like infinity shows up to show them that they belong to a whole bunch of people. Remember, these souls have really isolated, and so they can feel very disconnected to anyone. Sometimes they've gone from isolation to being invited to recognize that they belong to an entire clan. Many times, they're accompanied by one individual. Especially early on, I thought that was the best way to do it. I would encourage them to think of just one person who would come for them. God is love. What calms a person down more than being in the presence of the one loving them? That to me is about the most calming thing I can think of, to be with someone whom I know loves me and whom I trust. It was early on that I began asking people, can you think of anybody who died before you did, who you know loved you? Did you ever go to the funeral of a loved one? Did you know somebody that died before you did, who would have crossed over, and whom you know loves you? Would it be okay if I invited them, or we invited them, to come and be with you? And that is the winner and still champion question that opens up the passageway. Sometimes people show up before I've even had a chance to invite them explicitly, or before they're identified by name. Sometimes when I'm helping, the stuck one will say, "Look over there, it's my Aunt Tilly." It's funny, the process changed over time. But yes, someone is always there to help those who want to cross over. I've never seen it fail. Here's another question. Where do those you help go? Do they go into the light? Well, I'm going to deal a little bit with that more in a later section that has to do with what I'm calling afterlife geography. Where do they go? They certainly leave the circumstance that they were in, and the circumstances that they were in are makeshift at best. I've not seen anybody that went out of their way to feather a nest or build some afterlife way station. They're typically in a very nondescript place. Sometimes they want it to be as close to nothing as possible. Sometimes they're in a group with other people who died in a similar way. But when it's time to go, I've seen people go up an escalator together. I've seen some joyfully swept up into parades. In the story of Buddy, the conductor, in chapter 4 of my book, they link their arms together and are pulled along together like the cars of a long train. What else have I seen? Most of the time, it really isn't so much that I see a departure like a ship sailing out to sea. It's really more of a person showing up. And when they say yes to going with that person, they simply tell me they're leaving and they kind of float away. There have been a few occasions where there was something that transported them. Think of a moving sidewalk. In a big airport with multiple terminals, you often have those moving sidewalks. I've seen that happen a few times. And that seems to occur sometimes when the person who is about to cross over has relatively low energy available to them. Again, use an airport metaphor. There are plenty of people in airports who are ambulatory, that is, they're not wheelchair bound, but who can't walk the large distances involved in getting from place to place, and certainly not while dragging heavy luggage behind them. There are these carts that make it possible for people that have only so much energy to get where they need to go. There have been times when the one that I'm helping or that my prayer partner and I are helping has a little bit of energy, enough to say yes, to initiate, to take the first step. But then it seems like the universe supplies a moving sidewalk. I've seen it several times where people simply take the first step onto this device. Or they wade into a stream that carries them along. Do they go into the light? Not in the classic way that a lot of near-death experiencers often talk about a ball of light. I think a time or two I've seen a ball of light or had people describe that to me. But most of the time, they're busy telling me goodbye. They're moving out of my consciousness, and sometimes it feels like they're sort of shouting thank you over their shoulder.